getting some feedback from somebody. All right, Mayor, I think we're ready.
Okay. Thank you, Susan. We certainly want to welcome everyone to the Vinton Town Council meeting for this Tuesday evening, October 18th. And we will start with the roll call, please, Susan.
Councilmember Lyles.
Here.
Councilmember Mullins. Here. Councilmember Stovall. Vice Mayor McCarty.
Here.
Mayor Gross.
Here. And of course, we do have a quorum. Next, we'll have our moment of silence. We use that so that anyone can pray or meditate as they see fit. Hope you'll use this time for prayer. I certainly plan to, and I would ask you to keep, as always, keep this country, this community, and this council meeting with thoughts and prayers, and certainly our friends in Ukraine. Also, while we're standing, we'll have the Pledge of Allegiance. Councilmember Lyles, who's going to do that this evening?
After looking over the audience, all of the big crowd, now I think I'll just do it myself.
Well, I appreciate it. I know it's a difficult decision. Appreciate that. So if you would stand for those two items, please.
Please stand the flag. I pledge allegiance to the
Flag
flag
of the United States of America,
and
to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, folks. Before we get to the upcoming announcements, I'd just like to remind anyone, as you mentioned, looks like everyone's home folks tonight, but if you attend our council meetings, at the door there will be the printed agenda as well as a list of our guidelines for participation in the meeting. And with that, we will move to the upcoming events. What's going on, Vice Mayor?
A lot. We got a lot going on. On October the 27th, which is next Thursday, downtown trick or treat from 3 to 5. We love seeing the kids all dressed up in their costume. If you need more information, then you can call Chastity Barber. Thanks to all the local businesses that make this possible. With that, there will be roads closed. Pollard from Washington to Jefferson, Lee Avenue from Maple to Jackson, and Cleveland First Street to Maple. So they will be closed that day so the little ones can get around for trick-or-treating. Lancerlot on the 16th. It's Virginia, well, that's already happened, right?
Yes.
21st, Virginia Tech versus Ohio State at 6 p.m. and the 22nd, Virginia Tech versus Indiana at 7:30 p.m. That is at the Lancerlot, where we are the home of the Virginia Tech hockey team. Rosie's free entertainment is the 21st, Final Nation at 8, the 22nd, The Frequency at 8. Of course, Twin Creeks Brewery has a great turnout for their Wednesday night bingo starting at 6 p.m. Every Thursday they have the trivia night at 6 p.m. and live music and food trucks on Friday and Saturday. On November the 11th, there will be a Veterans Day at the War Memorial. The Boy Scouts will do a proper wreath laying and flag burning ceremony at 5:30 p.m. All are welcome, and for more information you can again reach out to Chastity Barber at nva.gov. Make sure that's what I got. That is all I have. Shh, this is kind of a secret, but my husband will be retiring from Grand Rental on the 28th, which is next Friday.
Woo-hoo.
And I have managed to get the day off, so I will have a big cake and some memory boards and stuff. So if you have the opportunity to stop by and wish him well, I'm sure that he would appreciate it. But he thinks something's going on. He's gotten pretty smart now. Over the years, I've been able to fool him, but anyway.
Took him a while.
Yeah, that's what's happening. So if you can come by, I'm sure you appreciate it. I think he's excited about it, but it's also going to be probably an emotional day. He's been here for a long time. So
Absolutely.
anyway,
Congratulations to him. That's the 28th, right?
Yes, it's a Friday.
And you said cake?
I think I'm gonna get a cake.
I'll be there.
Come on, everybody.
Candy the day before, cake that day.
Right. All right. Any other activities? you
Oh,
wanna
one
announce?
more thing. I haven't been able to confirm, but there's something big going on at McDonald's today. I just tried to go through to get me some coffee, and Mr. Lewis was out there directing traffic. There was a lot of people there. I saw some kids coming out with Halloween kids' meal boxes. And as I went by the intercom, I heard somebody asking about it. I think there is some promotional thing going on. The proceeds are going somewhere. I didn't hear that. So I will find out more information. But kudos to McDonald's because they're rocking it tonight.
Awesome. I love the way our merchants constantly support the community, all kinds of activities like that. It's great. Okay, if there are no other announcements, we'll move on to request to postpone or change the agenda. Anything, folks? If not, we will consider the consent agenda. Tonight it has a few resolutions, one to appropriate funds from an insurance claim, also a resolution appropriating some funds from the DMV, and finally a resolution to appropriate funds from Department of Criminal Justice, and that's for the police department. Are there any changes or additions to the consent agenda? Hearing none, we will entertain a motion.
I make a motion to accept.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion to accept by Vice Mayor McCarty and a second by Council Member Lori Marlins. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. All right, now to the fun part of the evening. We'll move on to the awards and presentations. Chief Drummond, I understand you have a quarterly report for the police department.
Yeah, yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of council, town staff for the opportunity to talk about the police department for the months of July, August, and September for this particular quarter, and give you a brief synopsis of police activity.
Is it not working?
No, you can change it on there,
I can't, sorry.
unless it's operator error.
No, you're good.
First slide, please. For the first slide, and you have a pamphlet on your individual desk, we'll talk about some of the statistics where we capture traffic stops for the months of July, August, and September. And what you'll notice is as numbers will either decrease or increase, and that's the way it always is, right? It's either going to go up and down, and of course that depends on events that are happening in the town. The seasons have an impact. Summer is busy, winter slows down. When you're working on a February night, you're not going to see very much activity because it's cold. Doesn't mean that you may not have a peak night, but things do have an impact on policing as far as weather, rain, snow, and how we respond, of course. So for your traffic stops, you have 291, 208, and 139. Calls for service or calls for service where police responded and offered personal service to it, or it could be handled by telephone as well, where each of the roughly continued on between the 1,000 range, from 1086, 1100, and 1026 that dipped down in September. Calls for service is also something that's dependent on whether people are vacationing, people are here, and of course if they need police services or not. We certainly aren't in control of calls for service, considering that a citizen is calling us. Traffic summonses correlate with traffic stops, and we'll get to those numbers in the next slide. Drug cases, of course, are cases that involve narcotics of any kind in the town of Vinton or within our task force, and overall criminal arrests sort of capture an umbrella that we'll get down to as well for those months that capture anybody that was arrested in the town of Vinton. DUI arrests or driving under the influence charges or driving under the influence of narcotics as well. And as the slides progress, we'll sort of break some stuff down, but that's just a brief synopsis of some of the core elements in policing. Next slide, please. So some highlights from quarter one. The total calls for service for that amounts into 3 months is 3,212. That's a lot of calls. There's a lot to unpack there as far as calls. Each call has a designation, meaning we responded for something. So they're titled with a different topic in our dispatch and how the officers respond. For example, of those 3,000 calls, I'll highlight some of them that are a little bit more prominent. Community policing was 107 calls for service. Community policing is just that. It could be an officer going out to the schools, patrolling the schools, whether inside or outside, going into a business and doing a community check, or foot patrol downtown. So it involves a lot of the community policing, the positive interactions with police. So it was 107 of those. We've also, out of that 3,000, there was a total of 117 disturbance calls in the town. Disturbances are when people aren't getting along, of course, they call us for a conflict resolution. 142 paper services. Paper service signifies that we served a criminal paper, a warrant, or emergency protective order, a temporary detention order, or a juvenile paper. So 142 of those got served as well over the span of 3 months, and 369 security checks. Security checks come from vacation watches. So you as a community member, it's important to remember, is you can email the police department and request that we check on your property while you're away. And that's what we do for every day that you designate it, and some have specific instructions on what to look for in cars, but we'll keep an eye on your property for the week that you're gone. So we assign security checks for that patrol division during that time frame. Security check also comes in the form of your businesses, where at night the officers, when there's downtime, there's no calls for service, they'll go around to our community, to Kroger's, to Big Lots, to our smaller businesses, and they'll physically check doors, walk around the property, and conduct that security check. So that's one of the important aspects of policing. The proactive policing is to make your presence known. And one way of doing that, of course, is doing security checks. Suspicious circumstances were 352 calls for service of that 3,000. Suspicious is a resident calling of something that's abnormal to where they're at, or as they're transitioning to the town, that warrants police intervention or at least a police contact. The next one is total, are we still on that slide? Yes. Total reports written, those are incident-based reports. Those are criminal reports that the officers have written. So 223 formal reports, investigatory reports were written in the police department. Within those reports, I'll skip down a few lines to traffic accidents. So it's a total of 75 accidents occurred in the span of 3 months in the town. And for better context with that, 59 of those accidents were property damage, where either was minor accident or an accident where only the cars were damaged. There was no injury or or there was no injury at all reported at the time. So 59 of those, and 16 of those were with personal injury. And personal injury can mean that you feel discomfort on your back to something serious. It catches it as a span that if you report personal injury, we record it as such. Going back to the first slide and capturing it on this one, of the 387 summonses issued by Town of Vinton officers, that accounted for a total of 638 traffic stops. So you have roughly 50%. And you'll notice that when we report here and we report in the next 3 months, next quarter, you'll find it interesting that it's always 50-50. It's always 50%, meaning education and a violation that was committed that warranted that traffic summons. It always seems to fall in line that way, I guess, given the warning to summons ratio. So you have 638 to 387. Of course, we talked about traffic accidents and drug cases. Total for investigations, whether that was stemmed from the patrol division on a traffic stop or a case that was started by a criminal investigations, was a total of 21. Before I proceed, is there any questions here, or would you like me to continue on?
I'm good.
I'll continue on. Next slide, please. This is a report from our Criminal Investigations Division. And this is kind of giving you just a synopsis of the cases that they're investigating. This is not getting into the intimate details of an open investigation, but a briefing of what they're doing down there as detectives. You have 2 cases that are obtained money by false pretense. One important aspect that I failed to mention is these cases may have not happened on this quarter, but they're actively working on it. It could be a case, in the case of malicious wounding that you see reported here, well, that incident occurred last year, but it's still an active investigation where 1 arrest has occurred and we're still working on that case. So that doesn't mean that that case has actually occurred in this quarter. It just means that it's active and a detective is still working on it. Of course, we have 1 active forgery case. And if you can see the trend here is I'm telling you the things that were active. I probably should have also highlighted on the cases that were cleared either through a successful resolution or deemed unfounded. But in this case, we'll kind of work off the numbers that we're presenting today. There's 3 grand larceny cases, and grand larcenies are anything that's over $1,000 in value. So your motor vehicle thefts and things like that fall under grand larceny as well. So there are 3 cases with 3 cases, 2 arrests. Personal assault, 4 cases, 3 active, 1 unfounded. Burglaries, 1 active case, and of course the malicious wounding that we talked about, and a runaway case that was recently, I'm sorry, it wasn't recently, but last month was cleared. And of course, we always want to make sure those are cleared with the person being safely located. Next slide, please. The Animal Control Division, Animal Control Quarterly Report. They're typically the most busiest through wildlife. A lot of wildlife transitions through the town, and we get a call whether there's a raccoon under someone's deck or a deer that's been stuck on the fence. We handle a multitude of it. Sometimes we defer to the Virginia Wildlife if it warrants it, but a lot of it can be handled through either the patrol division themselves or through our animal control officer. Really self-explanatory graph. Happy to answer questions should there be any. Nothing significant that's occurred on the animal aspect. I know there's attack animal, there's 3 people. If that's someone reporting whether they're walking a dog and it's bit somebody or even bit yourself and you have to get treatment and then we have to quarantine the dog, that's reported there. So if you're a pet owner and your dog for whatever reason bites you and you call the police, there's a measure that we have to follow in order, a protocol for safety, of course, rabies and vaccination and quarantining of the animal itself. So it's always not as extreme as it may seem on paper or face value, but nonetheless, it's something that we still report. Next slide, please. The Records Management Office, just like the police department and the officers, they're equally as busy, if not more, because all the paperwork that gets pushed into the police department goes to records management officer to include the accreditation aspect, and everything has to be logged into our records management system. Of course, dispersed to member agencies should it be applicable. So for under warrants entered into RMS, those are, anytime we get a warrant, it has to be entered into our records management system. Everything has to be captured, and that's where it will live the course of its life, even when it's served, so we can research it and find it. Total 271 warrants were entered through the 3 months. VSIN validations were 66, which is the Virginia Criminal Incident VSIN. Validations were entered for a total of 66. Summonses entered. Every time an officer enters summonses, each one has to be entered into our system and of course sent into the court systems as well. Weapons permit checks, those are people that have applied for concealed weapons permits. Anytime you apply for concealed weapons permits through our courts, that application comes to the police department for preliminary checks and that report's sent back to the courts. So you have a total of 31 of those. Merge reports, so when an officer writes an incident-based report, it goes through several channels. You write the incident-based report, it goes to your supervisor for a preliminary check, of course, to make sure all the data fields are populated correctly, grammar, and then it goes to a lieutenant and finally the deputy chief of police, and then it's merged into a system where that data, where that report can be shared with other agencies, especially it becomes beneficial in an investigatory standpoint. FOIA requests, we received a total of 87 of those. Those, of course, freedom of information. Act or FOIA requests, or it can be done in any measure. A lot of it is accident reports that are requested through insurance companies, or media representatives need information from a particular incident, or a citizen wants a report of something. There are parameters, of course, in what we can share and what we can't on FOIA, but nonetheless, FOIA is something that is constantly going through the police department. Officer subpoenas that are processed are those subpoenas that officers are subject to court. They've been subpoenaed to court and have to appear. Those get entered and then served on the officers for appearance. Criminal histories checked, or whenever we have to enter emergency protective orders, temporary detention orders, we have to do criminal histories checks and then enter it. That number just captures how many we've had to do over the span of 3 months. Next slide, please. Some of the events that have occurred in the last 3 months and overtime opportunities that have occurred as well. Of course, we had our wonderful July 4th celebration, which, total hit for the town. That requires officers to work that event. DMV traffic enforcement, so we are allotted money through a grant for DMV traffic enforcement. And traffic enforcement comes in many ways. Of course, saturation patrols during July 4th and peak holiday, weekends. And we also have it to where, so when you apply for the grant, under the grant hours, you have different times and different dates where some of your traffic accidents are more prominent, or we have more activity on the traffic aspect. And that grant allows us to offer overtime opportunity for that officer to work traffic enforcement, or you have an event where you want to do traffic education. That grant can be utilized for that, so that's a good funding source for the police department. The next one is CTAC. CTAC is where officers work at Lewis Gill Hospital, and that captures the mental health aspect of policing, where if an officer makes contact with a patient that requires medical services, and they're taken to Lewis Gill Hospital, we have, through the cooperation with the Valley and of course Blue Ridge Behavioral, we have an opportunity where a Vinton officer can work overtime at Lewis Gill. So if Officer Drummond takes a patient to Lewis Gill, there is an officer working overtime there through a grant, through funding, supplemental funding, where that patrol officer can give that patient to the officer working the grant, and that officer can return to the road and be a service in the town. Extremely beneficial, because the latter would be that an officer that's supposed to be on the road gets stuck at the hospital for 8+ hours instead of being here with us. So that grant is something that we're very lucky, we're very, very blessed to have, because that allows us to have that officer here back on the road. Of course, we all know our Mingles at the Markets, they require officers to work their overtime, and Pancakes with Police that we had at our Daily Bread in July. In August, we all know that we went through our reaccreditation process, and that came to a successful conclusion. National Night Out was a significant event nationally, and we thought that was a very nice event. Of course, DMV traffic enforcement is throughout the calendar year, and it renews every October. I'll apply for it and hopefully get it, but we get it every federal fiscal year, so we have the opportunity to allot officers every month to different hours, different times, how the department sees fit as far as what our data, what our analysis can capture. We were invited to the Fallen Officer Ogilvie Challenge. That was for Caleb Ogilvie, or Officer Ogilvie of Covington Police Department. Cardinal Academy had a fitness challenge where Vinton officers and member agencies participated in a physical fitness challenge in honor of Officer Ogilvie. Noah's Ark invited us to their local church for a first responders, it was a luncheon. They basically fed us lunch, and it was wonderful, and we got to eat with the kids. Mingle at the Market, of course, and we had our volley of promotion ceremonies that you all got to witness in the month of August. September, we continued with traffic enforcement mingle, and Officer Brandon Hill, Captain Lawless, and myself attended the Valiac conference for our reaccreditation. Next slide, please. Training is critical, and training will always be very important. You always want to do continuous training at the police department because legislation changes, training tactics changes, our policies change, and of course, personnel growth. If we're not training them, then they're not growing. So with the promotions came a lot of training requirements that our policies have, that we have to send officers to significant training so they show proficiency in their job. In July, officers went to criminal patrol drug interdiction training, school safety forum, radar LiDAR instructor, firearms instructor, homicide investigation, new deputy chief school, criminal patrol drug interdiction again, cell phone extraction. That's just data captured through cell phone. We live in a technology age, and we need to stay up on technology and the capabilities that law enforcement has with cell phone extraction. Urban patrol rifle, general instructor, new detective training, defensive tactics instructor, forensic science academy seminar, and Virginia Against Trafficking training as well. Next slide, please. Some of the current active grants that are under the police department is, of course, the DMV overtime grant that I referenced, that we focus on traffic. We also have both the LOLE block grant for 19 and 20, which I always forget it, the local law enforcement block grant. That grant is applicable to agencies that have reported violent crime in a 10-year within 3 years and a 10-year span. So you have 10 years to report of one of those years where you've had violent crime. In our case, within the last decade, we've been able to report it. So they allot X amount of money through, it's a formula-based grant through population. So they give you some funding to fortify, whether it's equipment, to renew training, or to kind of provide a better facility to house it. Like, we have a lot of gear and riot gear and shields that we have to store in areas, and some of the areas that we had were not conducive to deployment, so we were able to utilize that grant for that. We also utilized our grant to update our patrol bicycles, because we patrol with our bicycles as well into the neighborhoods, so we were able to capture that expense through the grant, and we were able to update all the officers' streamlight flashlights as well, because we need to see in the dark. Of course, we had coronavirus emergency supplemental funding, which, as you know, in the last few years, that's something that, we had to live with 2 years. And in our case, when an officer had to miss work as a result of coronavirus, we were able to use this grant as supplemental to cover those wages, and of course, also pay for the officer that had to cover that shift. And that kind of happened in the last 2.5 years that we went through coronavirus. Next slide. Improvements. We went through significant improvements in the police department over the last few months to the last few years, and this happened to be just one of the two projects that we covered within this reporting period. So over the last 3 months, with the excellent help, it was absolutely wonderful that Toby helped us through this. He was able to redesign the storage area in the police department. The storage area historically, decades ago, was used as temporary holding cells. That's no longer the need. We use it as storage for both equipment, files, and uniforms. So we completely renovated, put lockers in, and to make it look presentable and nice. We were able to utilize Toby for that, and reconfigure the cell doors to make them look like doors. We didn't take the cell doors out because there's no better door than a cell door. We just made it look a lot more presentable, considering we don't use them as cell doors anymore. And we completely renovated our Sally Bay. Our Sally Bay is used, of course, to transport somebody inside of our police department. It's used to, the officers can connect to, hard connect their computers into our internet in order to update their computers. Like any other computer, they require significant update, especially our software, so they can pull in there and connect and update. And of course, we, as you can tell in the picture, we store our patrol bicycles there as well. And you have each one of those cabinets that you see there is assigned to each patrol platoon, and they have their latex gloves, all the equipment that they may need, they may need to reissue out because they need, patrol officer may need it, is stored in the Sally Bay as well. So that was a significant improvement, because there was a lot of clutter there, probably like anybody's home garage. Whenever you don't know what to do with something, you put it in the garage. Well, we did that as well. So, we cleaned it out and actually made it presentable, of course, but actually useful for the officers to be able to get their work accomplished. Anything that we can do to make their lives easier on the end, on the administrative end, we try to accomplish at the police department. And I think that might have been the last slide. Of course, this presentation was something that we did a while back and we're reintroducing. And I'm certainly open for any questions, comments, and of course, anything that you guys would like us to touch on, we'd be more than happy to do so in future presentations as well. So with that, I am done, sir.
All right, thank you, sir. Just one or two quick things, but I'll give council a chance. You folks have any comments or questions?
Just a real quick question, Chief. I remember the last report, or probably maybe one before that, we were reported on a lot of drug overdoses. And is that in the drug case? Because if it is, it's gone down significantly.
So for drug overdoses, I'm sorry, I interrupted.
Seeing that, like they're decreasing?
They are decreasing,
Good.
but again, opioids is still a problem. Fentanyl is still a huge problem. Just because we didn't report a number that caught your attention doesn't mean that it's still not an issue. And of course, we're always still active with our narcotics investigation, even with our task force officer, and we tend to tackle that problem as a whole. We can all agree that when it comes to criminality or even narcotics, it has no borders. So we try to, as police departments or as chiefs at least, we try to tackle the problem as a collective group, because if one locality is succeeding, we all succeed as a valley. And of course, there's no threshold for drugs being pushed through the valley. It goes everywhere. So to capture that data, we had 4 reported overdoses in the last 3 months.
Okay. So, I mean, it was alarming, the last
Yes.
report.
Yeah.
It was, and so it has
It has gone down, yes,
gone
sir.
down, so that's good to hear.
Great,
Yeah, that was Molly.
thank you, sir. Ladies, anything in particular?
Thank you for the report.
No, very good,
very
very good
informative.
report.
You know, you have to remember as well, so on the first slide, I captured calls for service, and you'll see, calls for services can play, like I mentioned, if you're in July and it's peak season and you have people transitioning through the valley as a whole, going through vacation, commuting to the lake, you should see a spike in call volume, or not, hopefully not, but the summer months tend to be busier and things start to slow it down in the winter months, but you also have to view, I guess when we do our presentation for the year, you'll see our call volumes. I'm starting to capture data over the years and how our call volumes are going down. Well, that's subject to a community that's, I guess, not calling the police, right? When you live in a community that has, that is sort of transitioning and has, I'm trying to capture the right words, but when you're sort of establishing sort of a turning point, you have all this economic development coming in, all these beautiful events, and of course a proactive police force. You have a lot of vested interest in people that share the same vision into a town. Your call volumes start to decrease because you care about the community you live in. So I like to think that our call volume, you almost want to sell it, right? I want my call volumes to increase, but I don't. A functioning society would be one where you don't need police services. So it seems like our call volume in the town of Vinton is starting to decrease. Traffic will always be here. Of course, as you know, commuter traffic is, especially at 5 p.m., 4 p.m., is always very busy.
Yeah.
But as the town continues to grow and the quality of everything that's occurring, it reflects in our numbers as well. And there's a lot of good projects here, as you hear Mr. Peters, Ms. Sexton present here, and it seems to really correlate with our own data. So
Yeah.
congratulations to you all with that part.
And congratulations to you on a great report. Just one or two things I wanted to kind of touch on. You mentioned 369 security checks. I think it was 369. I wrote it down right. So that's where our citizens let you know they're going to be going on vacation or something like that. So how does that work? And do we have to give a long notice, or can I call on Friday and say, hey, I'm going for the weekend? How's that work?
You can certainly call. You can call the police department. We're 24/7. You can also go on the website, on the Town of Vinton's website, and of course, there's a police department caption on there where there's a form where you fill out a vacation check, and you can give as much information as you want. Of course, it's discreet. We don't share it with anyone. Or you can just say, I'm out of town from this date to this date. Love for you to drive by and check on my residence. I'm leaving the porch light on. So it's if it's off, then something's off. It can be however you want to share it.
Okay.
A lot of folks just call in, and of course, we'll take notes of it, and we disperse it to the personnel, and the sergeants, patrol lieutenants will assign that accordingly, and we'll continue checking on your property until you return.
That's great,
I
man.
like
What-
that.
That
That's
is great. If y'all just start letting the dogs out, shoot, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, yeah, that would.
I
But
wouldn't have to
see-
get anybody to stay at my house. They can let the dog out.
We'll pull the trash can to the curb, too.
Oh, well, I'll take care of your dog then. But no, that's, seriously, that's a great service, and, gosh, that's something I may start taking advantage of myself. That's awesome. And that personal service there, actually.
Well, you
for-
also have that, and one of the personal services that you have is vehicle unlocks as well. Not very many agencies in the valley, you probably even extend beyond that, still offer that service, where if you unfortunately lock your keys in the car, we'll dispatch an officer out there to help you out. I think at some point in our lives, we've probably all done that, so it's really nice to have that,
Yeah,
that service here.
first date with my wife.
We've used the service ourselves. It's we sometimes lock our own cars.
Oh, that's good. I feel better. The other thing I wanted to ask you about the FOIA requests, Freedom of Information Act. I notice there's a total of 87. Did I hear you say that's mainly from like traffic accidents, so insurance companies and our attorney friends? So is there a charge for that when you guys have to provide that information?
Almost 100% of the time, no. If it's a significant FOIA request where the officer, where maybe Ms. Johnson has to get involved to help us, or we even have to do research, it can get to an expense, and we tell the person requesting it on the front end, this is what you're looking at, because the person that has to pull the FOIA also has other duties that he'll have to put to the side. That is not a usual occurrence, very seldom, but most of your FOIAs are free of charge. It's a service that, for the community.
Very good. So if a citizen needs some information for their insurance company, then you can provide that?
That's free of charge. A lot of folks will come in and want their accident reports
Yeah.
printed out, or a face sheet for an incident report for insurance or whatever. Those are all free of charge, sir.
Yeah. Man, you guys seem incredibly busy. So for that quarter, on average, how many officers do you have in the entire department?
How many total officers do we have? We are a 27-man agency. Now, given the month, that could be different personnel-wise, especially, it depends on whether they're on vacation, because they also go on vacation and training. So you typically on a patrol shift, you'll have 4 officers on duty for 12 hours during the day, 7 a.m., 7 p.m., and you'll have 4 officers at night, 7 a.m., 7 p.m. That's accounting whether they're on vacations or not. We have minimum staffing as well, but we target for 4 on 4, 4 on days, 4 on nights.
Awesome. Great. Total of 27, did you say? Very good. Great report, man. I'm very impressed. Very impressed. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Any other comments, guys?
No, very good.
All right, thank you. Okay, with that, we'll move on. I do not see anyone from the Historical Society.
No, sir. Mr. Lehman was supposed to join us this evening, but something must have come up. We'll try to reach out and contact him and get him rescheduled for the next council
Okay.
meeting.
Well, he did turn 70 the other day,
Oh, yeah, he did.
so.
That's not got anything to do with it. Come on now.
Just kidding, Randy.
Yeah,
He
right.
may be traveling for his birthday.
Might be at
Maybe.
home.
Yes, since he's a very active guy at 70. So, all right, we'll move on. Next item is citizens' comments and petitions. I don't see any. And Susan, I suppose you have not received any in your office. So, all right, I don't see anything listed for briefings. So we'll move on to items requiring action. The first one, our town manager is going to present a resolution concerning some economic development.
Thank you, Mayor Gross, Vice Mayor McCarty, members of council. I have two items requiring your consideration this evening, both involving moving the Gishmill redevelopment project forward. I've provided several handouts at your desk that will help outline the various aspects of the proposed actions this evening. The first item requesting council authorization is to execute an amended performance agreement between the Town of Vinton, the Roanoke County Economic Development Authority, and the Gishmill Davie LLC. The second item this evening is requesting authorization for a construction loan and IRF loan between the town, the Roanoke County EDA, and the Gishmill Davie LLC. I will say that while it hasn't looked like there's been much activity at Gish's Mill recently, there has been a lot going on behind the scenes. In fact, since January of this year, we have completed a $250,000 historic stabilization grant from Department of Historic Resources. Part of that is the delay of taking the property to closing. As a result of that DHR grant, we had to keep the property in public ownership during the duration. But once we finished that project, Nathan worked with the developers to formalize and complete that grant in July. And once that was completed, we were able to kind of move the project forward with our goal to get it closed and under the ownership of the private developers. During that time period, we were also busy, the developers, and David Hill's with us this evening, one of the owners, proposed owners. They did work towards finalizing the construction level detail, the design plans for construction, and pricing these plans out with the construction contractor. And that kind of is what we're here about tonight. At that point, we became aware that there was a gap that had developed in the sources of funding that we had pulled together, a number of private financing options, some grants, and then some public development incentives, and realized that there was a fairly substantial gap that had developed primarily out of the recent inflationary market with labor costs, materials costs, and certainly interest rate hikes, kind of exposed that gap that didn't exist almost 2 years ago when we originally entered into this agreement with Davie. So rather than allow the project to dissolve, staff and the developers put their heads together, and we tried to come up with some solutions in order to get this project over the hump. We considered applying for some additional grants. We would take much longer and certainly no guarantees that we would receive those grants. So what we did was we looked at the available funding on the table, the available funding that the development was going to generate for the town and future promised revenues, and we came up with the amended performance agreement and the loan agreement you have before you this evening. As I mentioned, the performance agreement really serves, and the loan agreement serve as the contracts between the town, the EDA, and the developer. And the agreements spell out all the delivery, the development incentives, the loan terms, and really lays out what the aspects of the public-private partnership provides. I'll get into a little bit of the details on the amended agreement. One aspect of the agreement is we provide a development incentive grant. This is for proposed site work, gateway enhancements, and then facade improvements to the structure, and as well as utility connection fees and permitting fees that we will reimburse the project. So the development incentive grants in a total of $398,000 and an additional $60,000 in reimbursables for permitting fees and connections. The town will also utilize a construction loan as the vehicle that will provide an additional $1 million of funds paid out in 5 equal installments. These installments will be paid out over various stages of construction, and with the 5th and final payment being made when the property actually receives its occupancy permit. And so this is a way that we can help. This is really the same incentives that we were providing before with the original agreement. We've just modified those to provide those up front in the project as opposed on the back end. And the future promised revenues will then reimburse the town for the funds provided as the incentive. The loan is designed to be forgiven by a tenth each year. So as long as the performance targets are met, this includes a minimum of $48,000 annually in meals tax, maintaining 24 full-time employees, and achieving the total investment of a minimum of $3.6 million in rehabilitation of the structure. So if any of these targets are not met with any of those 10 years, the loan must be paid back for that given year. So for an example, if the performance, one of those performance measures is not met in year 3, the developer must pay back 10% for that year of the 1/10 of the project. If it's 2 years not met, it'd be 20%. 3 years not met performance would be 30%. So that's how we're providing the funds up front to assist in the project to get moving. But if the performance is not met and the facility's not operating and generating revenue, then the developer has to pay that back in those 10th increments. And these agreements also provide that the DHCD IRF loan remains intact, and that will be paid back to the town as well. We have deferred that. The DHCD allows us to defer that for 20 years. Basically, that deferment is to allow for the private lending, the private financing to be paid off first, and then the longer term, the DHCD IRF loan can be paid back to the town. I would like to note that the renovated property, as I mentioned, is anticipated to generate in excess of $165,000 annually in new taxes. And it's these revenues that will then, in return, pay back the public investments that were able to assist the project in the start. I also want to note that the total construction is expected to be about $3.9 million. And the developer has secured $2 million in private lending. So this makes this a true public-private partnership where about half of the funding for the project is provided with the private side, and about half of the funding is provided with the public side, with a mix of development incentives and grants that we've established or been awarded from the state. There were 2 primary objectives that when we started this project some 6 years ago that we had intended to meet. Number 1 objective was to rehabilitate and preserve the town's founding structure. The second objective was to encourage redevelopment in order for it to generate employment and revenue. And these would in turn pay back the public incentives to preserve and rehabilitate the structure. So summer number 2 would help meet number 1 objective. So I will like to report that we have met both of those objectives with these amended agreements. And we have proven that these public incentives do help provide successful redevelopment projects of underperforming properties, such as the former library in McAdoo's property, the Roland E. Cook, the Billy Bird Apartments, and certainly most recently Vineyard Station. I have presented the terms of these amended agreements to both the Town Council Finance and Economic Development Committees. Both have endorsed these amended agreements and recommended they move forward. And tomorrow morning, the Assistant Planning and Zoning Director, Nathan McClung, will be presenting these amended agreements to the Roanoke County Economic Development Authority for their consideration. And I would like to point out that Mr. David Hill is in attendance this evening, so if you have any questions, I'm sure he'd be welcome to answer those. Nathan McClung is here, and would like to thank him for all his efforts over the last couple of years of carrying the bulk of the heavy load to get this project to the finish line. And certainly, but not least, Jeremy's efforts on the attorney's side to represent the town in constructing all these documents. While you only have a couple of them before you this evening, there are 8 or 9, I believe, agreements that are associated with formalizing the contracts between the 3 parties. So, Jeremy, you have anything to add?
The only thing I want to make, I may have misheard Pete, and so if I get this incorrect, he'll correct me. On the penalty percentage, it's not always a straight 1/10. There's also a ratio of how much they miss a target by. So it wouldn't necessarily be, if they
All or
missed
nothing.
the number of employees by one employee, it wouldn't be.
Gotcha.
They wouldn't lose the whole 1/10. They would lose
Right.
a percentage of the 1/10. So
Gotcha.
I know that's getting into the weeds, but I did think I heard that incorrectly, so I wanted to make sure that.
Thank you for pointing that out. I think
That is-
I failed to
Important details, so yeah.
mention that. So council, I'll be happy to answer any questions as well as Nathan, Mr. Hill. But I would respectfully request that you consider authorizing the execution of these two agreements for the Gishmill.
So the first one is for the performance agreement, right?
The first action is for the performance agreement. There's two separate actions. One is for the performance agreement, the amended performance agreement, and the second one would be to authorize the loan agreements for the construction and the IRF loans.
And the performance agreement sets kind of the framework of the transaction, all the moving parts. And then the loans are what are providing the resources that Gishmill needs to renovate the property and turn it into a successful venture. So, and
Great.
the two loans, the IRF loan is the loan that gets paid back, and the construction loan, ideally, all things going forward, is the one that is forgiven.
Right, gotcha. And we will certainly vote on those two items separately, but as we just continue the discussion, which actually involves both items, I just wanted to touch base with David. Mr. Hill, anything in particular you wanted to add tonight, or? You're a familiar face here in town. It's always good to see you, sir.
Great to be here, and you know, I want to just thank the staff, Pete, Jeremy, Susan, Nathan, and there are probably others that I haven't gotten to meet, but when prices started to skyrocket and interest rates started to get out of whack, I made a call to Pete and said, we've got to figure out what to do, and I've just been really impressed that the Denton staff sort of said, we've been very transparent all along with everything in this project, including all the numbers, and so that they could see it themselves and sort of said, well, here's how you fix this, and they had a great way to do it. So it's a model, I think, for not only for our project, but if this works, continues to work, it's an economic development model for a lot of other places. So Benton continues to impress me with, how to continuously make a town better. So
Thank you.
I appreciate all of your efforts on this.
Well, thank you, Mr. Hill, very much for those comments, and I too agree that our staff, they're powerful, they're a great staff, and they've worked hard on this, and I think without a doubt, our staff and I think our size lends itself to a lot of flexibility that we have, but maybe some other folks don't have. So we've been successful on a lot of projects in recent years, and I think both of those items, our staff and our flexibility, contribute to that. So I'm glad you picked up on that. I appreciate that very much. Yeah, and we always enjoy working with you. It's one of the things about this project that really excites me. I know we have a developer, or a couple of guys that we know and respect, and we have a lot of confidence in you folks. So I'm sure this project will move along as it should. So,
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
This one's more difficult than all the others. But, I think at the end,
Yeah.
it's going to be, even my friends from out of town, I get them to come look at this, say, you think we're insane? I say, here's the deal, this is going to be the hardest one of all, but when you're finished, it's going to be the best one of all.
I agree.
Keep getting assurances from others out of town that might have different perspectives.
I agree with that 100%. Very important project, and I know it's been a lot of work for a lot of people, but I do think the end result will be phenomenal. It's a very important project, and that obviously we want to make it work financially, but we all know that's a gateway to our community. Plus, it has a tremendous amount of historical value. So that project is more it's more than just the value of the dollars and the cents, more than just the tangible value. I think there's a lot of intangible value there that will be good for our town. So I'm very excited about this project, and I do think it's the highest and best use for it. So it's really exciting. So thank you, sir. Thank you for being here.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, Council, I didn't mean to jump out there so quickly. I know you guys probably got. Yes, sir.
Mayor Gross, I just have one more item. On the first action this evening, the resolution also provides for a budget transfer to kind of meet the development incentive grant that's
Okay.
due at closing. So I just wanted to highlight that. Thanks for
Great.
the clerk for pointing that out. I overlooked that piece.
Thank you. Yeah, we will make sure folks get paid, so.
And the only other thing I would point out is there are still some moving parts, and so we're approving these agreements in substantially this form, so there could be a few tweaks here and there, but nothing material from this point forward.
Great. Well, we count on you and our staff to take care of those tweaks there, Jeremy. Council?
Yeah, I just
Thank
want
you,
to say, the only reason that, one of the only reasons that the town's in the position that it's in is because of people like you that saw a vision in our town with some abandoned buildings that we had and had the vision to make those into fruition that really ultimately is changing our town. Here's another opportunity that, you step up to the plate for another building that nobody wanted to touch, and going to make it into something that everybody's want to go to, and like the mayor said, our gateway into our town. So thank you for stepping up to the plate, and the town doing everything, the staff doing everything it can to meet what you need to do this project. Or without you, we'll be looking at the mayor over top of his head, and that's all we
That's
will
kinda
see for
shiny,
the rest of that building. With like Pete was saying the other day, without that, one day it would collapse and end up in Smith Mountain Lake. So thank you for restoring that building and sticking with the town and doing everything that you do.
Yeah, yeah.
He said it all. Thank you
Yeah.
so much for believing in Benton and allowing us to help you.
Yes, we really appreciate that. And as I was reading through the notes, everybody should also know that this isn't the first we're seeing of this. Mr. Peters made sure we knew the details, and in our meeting package, there's like 100 pages, and when I was looking over it, I was thankful for Jeremy Carroll. Thank you, thank you, thank you. For getting everything, all the T's crossed and the I's dotted, and keeping up with all that. You're very good at what you do.
Thank you.
And we appreciate you being here. It also shows how much you're dedicated to this project, and we are too, and I think it's going to be great.
Great. Well said. Yes, I'm glad you mentioned this is not the first time we've seen this, that's for sure. We've all been through this, and that's important. Okay. Any other comments? All right. Okay, Council, as we mentioned earlier, there's actually two resolutions. The first resolution would approve the amended performance agreement as we've heard described by our town manager.
I'll make a motion to approve the amended performance agreement.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion by Councilmember Lyles, second by Vice Mayor McCarty. Susan, please call the roll.
Councilmember Lyles?
Yes.
Councilmember Mullins?
Yes.
Vice Mayor McCarty?
Yes.
Mayor Gross?
Yes. Thank you, Council. And the second resolution would approve the granting of the construction loan as we've heard described here this evening.
And the IRF loan.
And the RF, yes, all the loans. Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to adopt the resolution.
Second.
All right, we have a motion by Councilmember Mullins, second by Councilmember Lyles. Susan, please call the roll.
Councilmember Lyles?
Yes.
Councilmember Mullins?
Yes.
Vice Mayor McCarty?
Yes.
Mayor Gross?
Yes. And thank you, folks, for pointing out the IRF loan and all that. It's all in there. Council, thank you for that vote. Certainly want to congratulate staff, once again, for their hard work. Our great developer for having that vision and sticking with us.
Now it's up to Nathan to finish it.
Yeah. Go for it, Nathan, yeah,
No pressure.
yeah, all right.
He's eating his
So yeah, council, thank you. This, you know, I do think this is fulfilling a vision that some folks have had for quite some time, so it's important. And I want to thank everyone that worked on this, but I also want to thank our citizens for their confidence that they've placed in us. And recently we've gotten some very, very good comments about all the good things going on in town. And none of that happens without hard work and vision. And David's been a big part of that. So thank you, folks, for supporting the actions of council as we continue to make investments in our town. Thanks. Okay, Mr. Manager, any updates?
I would just like to make mention, while I have the opportunity, about the bridge work that's going to be taking place starting November 7th on Garthwaite Bridge. There will be some lane closures that may affect some of the commuting folks coming through and about through town. So we'll be putting up some social media posts, some website posts. We'll actually have a message board out on Washington Avenue that will be installed prior to the construction getting underway. So that is preventative maintenance to prolong the life of the bridge structure. And so I just wanted to make everybody aware that there will be some transportation kind of challenges during that time period. We're trying to work with the contractor to minimize those to the degree that we can, but there will be some not full lane closures, but partial lane closures in either direction during the construction.
Okay. And about how long should that last, approximately? I don't want to nail you.
We have a 90-day window for construction, but we don't think that will take that long. We're optimistic that we can get it done in 60 days, weather pending.
Okay, great.
And this won't interfere with the Christmas parade.
No, we have informed the bridge contractor that December 1st, the bridge needs to be operational that evening. No lane closures can happen during that time period. We're going to, like I said, try to minimize the effects during the commuting hours, but there will be some inconveniences as a result of the bridge. But this is obviously a long-term benefit, so something we need to take care of.
Thank you.
That is all I have.
Thank you. And it's good to know that we do continue to carry on our maintenance of our facilities and our infrastructure here in town. It's really exciting to hear about all these economic development projects, but there's still day-to-day work that has to be done on our infrastructure and certainly keeping the peace in town. So all that continues in town. That's always good to hear. So we'll move on to reports. You did say that's all right, sir. So we'll move on to reports from the committees. Mr. King, I think it's your turn.
Mayor, members of council. I've got two reports to go over this evening. It's going to be July and August. This is the period that is kind of after our personal property billings and in between real estate. So it's important that our monthly revenues stay strong, and luckily for both months they've continued to do so, and that would include our meals tax, our parimutuel tax, cigarette stamp sales, things of that nature. Cash position remains strong. I know we talked about the end of the fiscal year last month in June. It ended up the year very well with a increase of about 1.8 million to the total cash line. So moving forward into the first couple months of the fiscal year, we've continued to carry and nurse that strong cash position along. We did get our second infusion of ARPA funds in July, which increased our grant fund, which is really going to be our ability to continue with our CIP projects. So all in all, things remain strong, and really couldn't ask for anything better as far as revenues go. Do you all have any specific questions about projects or anything of that nature?
I don't.
No, I think so.
No, I'd just like to say that we were talking the other day in the Economic Development Committee meeting that, 5 years ago, we wouldn't have been in the position to be able to help with projects around the town like we're able to right now because of because we were cash strapped, and now we're in a position to where everything's falling into place. And the town is changing.
It is. It's really nice to see every month. You know, we obviously check the revenues from our you know, various producers, and they're staying steady or increasing every month, regardless of what variables we're seeing around us. So, like I said, we're you know, thrilled and just glad we're able to provide the things we are for the town, and,
Yeah.
and
Yep.
continue to promote Vinton and create new things. So.
Okay. Well, thank you, sir. We appreciate that report. Is there a motion to accept the Finance Committee report as presented?
I'll make a motion to accept.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion by Vice Mayor McCarty, second by Councilmember Mullins. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Thank you, sir. Good job.
Thank you.
Okay, council, it's your turn to talk. Can you imagine? Lori, if you'd like, we will start with you tonight.
Okay. Well, once again, good news tonight. I mean, we're moving right along, and it's very good. I hope everyone came out to the Fall Festival. It was the perfect fall day. We couldn't have ordered up any better weather for that, and the crowds looked good, and it was a good day. I usually always attend, especially for the doggy pageant and all the good stuff. But this year was kind of special because my daughter's a journalism major, and she was writing a story on our Fall Festival. She had to do a pre-event story, and she talked to Angie Tuning and Chastity about that, and then she got some interviews at the Fall Festival for her event story. So we'll have to see what kind of grade she gets. We haven't heard back yet, but she's been working on that, and I thought that was exciting. And she wouldn't let me give her a quote because she said they'll recognize my last name is the same as hers, and I was like, I can still tell you what I think.
That's right.
So I'm excited to see what she comes up with and reports on our good day. And she says Debbie Adams is one of her heroes.
I do.
She loves Debbie.
Yeah, we all do.
We do.
Yeah.
So that's it.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Ma'am, you have anything further?
The only thing, I was going to mention the Fall Festival, but she did a great job of that. The only other thing is November the 16th, the Lions Club does a Christmas shopping trip where they get names from the counselors at elementary schools, and then they go out and purchase gifts for them. And a lot of times they need volunteers for that. So if anybody's interested in helping out with that, it's during the day. Typically go in the morning. They're finished by about 11. But if you're interested in helping out with that, just let me know.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Sir?
I think everything has been touched on. Fall Festival was great. It was perfect weather. Just like to mention and keep in our thoughts of the family of the former mayor of Covington and his wife that was in that tragic accident on Airport Road just a few days ago. So
Yes.
I'm sure it's hitting that community pretty hard, as it would any community. So.
Yes, it would. Thank you for that. You're right. Good folks. Under the mayor section tonight, as you guys mentioned, Fall Festival this year was awesome. It really was great. The other thing I'd like to mention just briefly, the town continues to be involved in regional activities. As many of you know, council members as well as staff members serve on regional boards and commissions. One of those committees recently had a get-together, and it was good to see folks at the Greenway Commission annual meeting. And of course, the town of Vinton is heavily represented in that group. As a matter of fact, former council member Janet Shire is the current chair of the Greenway Commission, and it was good to see Julie Toucey and her husband Brian there. So we are very active and supportive of the Greenways. So it was just a reminder that we do a lot of things regionally, not just here in town. Okay, anything further to come before council this evening? No? If not, we'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second to adjourn the meeting. All in favor signify by saying, well, by leaving. How's that?
Okay.
God bless.